my prayer in the desert, when all that's within me feels dry. This is my prayer in my hunger and need. My God is the God who provides. And this is my prayer in the fire, in weakness or trial or pain. There is a faith proved and more worth than gold, so refine me, Lord, through the flame. And I will bring praise, I will bring praise. No weapon formed against me shall remain. I will rejoice, I will declare, God is my victory and He is here. This is my prayer in the battle, when triumph is still on its way. I am a conqueror and co-heir with Christ, so firm on His promise I'll stand. And I will bring praise, I will bring praise. No weapon formed against me shall remain. I will rejoice, I will declare, God is my victory and He is here. All of my life, in every season, you are still God. I have a reason to sing. I have a reason to worship. All of my life, in every season, you are still God. I have a reason to sing. I have a reason to worship. All of my life, in every season, you are still God. I have a reason to sing. I have a reason to worship. And I will bring praise, I will bring praise. No weapon formed against me shall remain. I will rejoice, I will declare, God is my victory and He is here. This is my prayer in the harvest, when favor and providence flow. I know I'm filled to be emptied again. The seed I received I will sow. Worthy was and is to come. With all creation I sing praise to the King of Kings. You are my everything, and I will adore you. Filled with wonder, awestruck wonder, at the mention of your name. Jesus, your name is power, breath and living water, such a marvelous mystery. Yeah. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. With all creation I sing praise to the King of Kings. You are my everything, and I will adore you. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. With all creation I sing praise to the King of Kings. You are my everything, and I will adore you.
You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. And great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. And great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. And all the earth shall shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, So we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you only. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you only.
Hi, my name is Alexis. I'm CMC on Roush 3rd. I'm going to be wrapping up our discussions on joy and grief by talking to you about what joy is. In my experiences with joy and grief, I've come to believe that joy isn't just a feeling of happiness, but it's a looking forward with hope to what God is doing in the midst of that grief. I'd like to share a story with you. When I was 14, like a lot of us, I was navigating boys and friendships and all that crazy stuff that we deal with when we're so young. Unfortunately, though, I replaced God at the center of my life with those friendships. Because of the unhealthy nature of what I did and the nature of some of those friendships, I became depressed and I started down the path of anxiety. Eventually it became so bad that there were times that I would really, really hope that I wouldn't wake up the next morning. I just couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. It was so dark. Thankfully, though, God placed a friend in my life that could see through those lives, and through her consistent friendship, I was able to start healing. Grief is a web of emotions, but at the middle of it is denial. And I just lived in denial during that time. I would tell everybody, including myself, that I was doing great. Life was wonderful. Obviously, that wasn't true, though. As I came out, though, in that healing, I began to realize that God had actually grown me during that time. He had shown me that my friendship with Him was so important, and that putting Him at the center of my life was absolutely necessary. I also recognized that if during that grief and that hard time I had been able to cling on to the fact that God was going to grow me, I probably could have seen the light at the end of that tunnel. I probably would have actually experienced joy. There were a couple of verses that really helped me make sense of what I was going through, and those were James 1:2-4. I'd like to share them with you. Consider it pure joys, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. To be happy, to feel happy, I had to pretend that my sorrows were invisible. Obviously, that didn't work out too well. But eventually I was able to see that not only had God grown me to be able to recognize the importance of my friendship with Him, but He had also placed a wonderful friend in my life that's to this day my very best friend. I'd like to point out to you and read to you again verses 3 and 4. They say, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. You'll notice that these verses say perseverance a lot, and I think that a really good way of explaining this is long-standing patience. Actually, some translations use the word patience. The Greek for this is hupomene, and it takes that word patience and it colors it with this idea of hope. And I think when we look at those verses and we see that God makes it so we're not lacking anything, and he's maturing us and he's growing us, that it takes a patience. It takes allowing that virtue of patience to be instilled in us, but it also is colored by hope, by this idea that God is working in our lives. And I think it's that confidence and that hope that brings us joy. I'd like to share with you another story, but this time a story of when I was able to cling on to James's words, and I actually did experience joy. The December after I graduated high school, my 16-year-old brother was diagnosed with leukemia. The first 6 months were absolutely crazy. I was living at home, and so taking care of the house largely fell on me. I also had a 18-month-old and 3-year-old foster sisters. So I was the one that would get them ready in the morning for daycare and the one that would take care of them before my mom could get home from Mott's Children's Hospital in the evenings. And I so totally could have focused on the unknown. I could have focused on the loneliness I was experiencing during that time. When I wasn't at school, I was at home, either with very little girls or by myself, and my family was taking care of my brother an hour away at a hospital. And my friends were very supportive, but obviously they weren't experiencing it the same way that I was. But instead, I was able to just cling to the fact that God was working in this, and he was going to work it out for my good and for my family's good. I was able to experience so much love from God's people, our friends and family, our church. They came around us with groceries and love and dinners. It was so important to us. In verse 4 of James, it says, "Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." And not only was I getting to experience so much of God's love and finding joy in that, but God was able to solidify something for me during this time. And that is that God's timing is absolutely perfect. The day that we found out about my brother's leukemia was also my dance studio's dress rehearsal for the Nutcracker. They had let me come back to help with it. And that was really exciting for me, but little did I know that it was going to be so important for me. Instead of sitting in a hospital or home alone, waiting for the unknown, I was able to be with the girls who were my second family. They were my prayer sisters all through high school. And I just was surrounded by my closest support outside of my family during that time. Also, it was a Friday, and typically my little sisters didn't have daycare on Fridays. But the week before, they had gotten lice, and so to make up for that day, they were going to have daycare that Friday. It was kind of a weird blessing because, lice. But at the same time, it took an extra stress off of my parents from having to worry about finding a place for my little sisters during that doctor's appointment. My favorite story, though, was a couple of weeks later. It was my mom's birthday, and she was talking with some doctors, and the doctor was telling her about this fruit and vegetable cleaner that she needed for my brother because of his immune system. And she was super overwhelmed. She had no idea what they were talking about, what this cleaner was, where to get it. At the same time, though, back home, a friend walked up to my aunt and handed her a gift bag and said, "This is Brandy's birthday present. It's kind of weird. It's more practical than a gift. I don't know if she'll like it or if she'll use it, but for some reason I just thought of her and wanted to give it to her." In that gift bag was the exact cleaner that my brother was going to need. And that's just so cool to me to see how God was working in that. Obviously, in these stories, I got to see God working right in the moment. But that's not necessarily what was typical. Oftentimes, it was waiting, it was patience, it was knowing that God was going to work. Knowing that God was working, even though maybe I couldn't see it. Or at least not the way I wanted to see it. Spring break of 2017, I hit my loneliest. It was the very lowest moment for me. And my brother had in-hospital treatment Monday through Thursday. And so he was gone. My dad was at work during the day and spending the nights at the hospital with him. My mom was only home in the evenings and spending the day at the hospitals. Monday, my only companion was my now 20-month-old little sister who had the stomach bug. Tuesday, she was better, but it was just me, and I had the stomach bug. And then Wednesday and Thursday, it was, again, just me, except for a couple hours when I was picked up to go work. I could have gotten really upset during that time, and I did cry a few times, but it was a healthy cry this time. I was able to look my loneliness right in the face and say, God, I don't know what's happening right now. I don't know why I have to experience this, but I know that you're working through this, and I know that you're going to work this out somehow in a way that's good for me. And the reason I was able to say that, the reason I was able to start processing what was happening was because I had that hope, and that hope was bringing me joy. And because I had joy, I was able to look at my grief in a way that was good, in a way that actually was beneficial. A verse that I think really kind of supports what I'm saying here is 1 Corinthians 10:13. And to paraphrase it, it's that God doesn't give us any more than we can handle so long as we put our hope in him. And that hope is so important because God gives us that strength. And that's so important. This past spring, my brother finished his chemo treatment. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that hope wasn't misplaced. We experienced so much joy when we came to the end of that. And I can tell you that even if it hadn't ended that way, there still would have been joy. There would have been joy in knowing that things happened because God's working things for our good, even when they don't always seem like it. Thankfully for me, though, I got to experience that joy with my brother. I still don't fully understand why I went through this. My family went through this. I know, though, that God's using it. I know that he has used it. The fact that I can be so confident in his timing and in his words is something that I'm carrying with me forever now. And if anything else, I can be certain that joy is, in fact, the hope that we have when we place our faith in God, that he is working in the midst of our grief. I'd like to close our time with a prayer for each and every one of you. God, I thank you for each and every one of us on this campus. I am so thankful that you are in our past, you're in our present, and you're in our future. God, you are in the midst of our griefs when we experience them, but you're also in the future, which means that you're able to work those out in a way that's good for us, that's beneficial, that's going to grow us, that's going to bring us closer to you and more like Christ. I pray for those who are going through sorrows, that are going through grief, that you would remind them of the hope that you offer them. That, God, they would be able to experience the joy that comes along with that. God, you're so, so very, very amazing, and you're so loving. You just wrap us up in so much love. God, I pray that each and every one of us would feel that today. Amen.